In the winter of 1861, on a ridge above the Gauley, a trapper went out after a lost mule and didn't make it back by dark. His sons found him near first light, half buried in a drift, breathing but barely. They did what every man on that mountain grew up believing. They got a fire going fast, stripped off his wet clothes, rubbed his arms hard to bring the blood back, and poured whiskey down him to warm him from the inside. But the man was dead before noon. It wasn't the cold that killed him, and it wasn't a bear either, though bears got blamed for most of what happened on that mountain. It was the fire, the rubbing, and the whiskey. The exact things his sons did to save him were the things that killed him. What was going wrong in his chest that morning has a name now, but back then it didn't, so it never made it into any survival guide. There was one thing those boys could have done instead to get their father home, but they had no way of knowing it. The scary part is that it wasn't bad luck that killed that trapper. It was good survival advice, the kind every man on that mountain swore by. And that kind of advice put more frontier men in the ground than bears ever did. I've got 5 of them for you. The first 4 will cost you a hand, a foot, and a night you don't walk away from. The 5th is what took the man on that ridge, and the same one I nearly lost somebody to myself, with my own 2 hands on him. Stay with me, neighbor. This one's worth your 20 minutes. I'm Amos Calder, 6th generation on this ridge. My people walked up out of the Carolina backcountry in the 1780s and stayed. My grandfather Eben raised me after my daddy died young, and before Eben passed, he sat me down and made me copy everything he knew into a leather journal, and he made me swear it wouldn't die with him. So here I am, keeping my word. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something, because it's going to change how you hear everything that comes after it. This isn't a video about your grandfather being wrong. Your grandfather was right about most everything he ever taught you, and so was his. This is about what got slipped in beside him. Somewhere along the way, real skill and pure counterfeit got handed down the same table, in the same voice, and most families never sorted one from the other. Nobody checked. Why would they? It felt like inheritance either way. Real skill came down through hands. Somebody knelt beside you and showed you, and you did it wrong until you did it right, and your body remembered what your head couldn't quite explain. The counterfeits came down a different road. They came down through print. A scout manual, a magazine column, a western on a Saturday matinee screen, and for about 100 years, print was louder than hands ever were. There are 5 of these I want to hand you tonight, neighbor. 5 things that ride into your head looking like your great-grandfather's own wisdom, and only some of them are. Eben warned me off 4 of them, sat me down one at a time over the years and told me plain, "This one's a lie, boy, and here's why." 4 times he caught it before I ever needed the truth. The 5th one he never got to. Maybe he didn't know it himself, or maybe he ran out of years before the lesson came due. I learned that one myself, on a mountain, with somebody's life sitting in my 2 hands, and it is the reason I am sitting here talking to you tonight instead of somewhere else, thinking about something else entirely. We are going to go through all 5, in order, exactly the way I got them. 4 you can carry lightly. The 5th is going to cost you something to hear, same as it cost me to learn it. If you're new around here, hit that subscribe button, and I'll tell you honestly why. It's not for my sake. It's because the old skills we dig back up on this channel, the real ones sorted out from the print and the pictures, once you've seen one, you're going to want the next, and the one after that. That's just how it works when a man starts getting his family's knowledge back. What I'm handing you tonight is what's on the record and what my grandfather Eben gave me with his own 2 hands. If somebody near you is hurt bad, you get real help coming, and you get it coming fast. Everything I'm about to walk you through is for the stretch of time before that help arrives, which on a ridge like mine can be a long stretch indeed, longer than any of us would like. Keep that in your pocket. We're going to need it before the night's through. First, number 5, the one that's in the most heads of anybody watching this. It won't kill you outright. It'll just walk you in a slow, confident circle until the light's gone and you're a lot further from help than you were an hour ago. Picture a man in unfamiliar timber, the light already starting to drop through the branches, going tree to tree, checking the bark on one trunk, then the next, then the one after that. He's not panicked yet, he's got a method, and the method is working, or so he believes, because every trunk he checks tells him the same comforting thing: moss on the north side. He learned it as a boy, maybe from a scout troop, maybe from a paperback he read twice. He's checking his bearing off the moss the way another man might check a compass, and he's got that particular quiet confidence of somebody who thinks he's found north. It's one of the most widely believed woodcraft rules there is, and it makes such good sense on its face that hardly anybody questions it. Careful people teach it to their own children. It sounds exactly like the kind of thing a grandfather would have known cold. Here's the trouble, neighbor. Go find the earliest printing of that rule you can locate, and you'll notice something curious about where it comes from. It doesn't come from a man who spent his life in the timber. It comes from somebody writing about the timber, packaging it up neat for a scout handbook or an adventure magazine, decades after anybody was actually living by it. Moss doesn't follow direction. Moss follows moisture and shade, and those two things don't care one bit which way is north. On an open slope, moss grows wherever the damp sits longest, and that can be any side of the trunk depending on how the ground tilts. Down in a creek bottom, with shade coming from every direction at once, a stand of trees can be mossed clean around the whole trunk, or hardly mossed at all. The failure isn't that the rule leaves you a little off. The failure is that it leaves you feeling certain while you're walking in exactly the wrong direction, and a man who's confidently wrong covers a lot more bad ground than a man who knows he's lost. The land nav people will tell you plainly that moss is one of the least reliable natural indicators there is, right alongside guessing wind direction off which way the leaves are curling. What actually holds is simpler, and it's been sitting there the whole time. The sun rises close to east and sets close to west, and a stick planted upright in open ground will throw you a shadow you can mark. Wait 20 minutes, mark again, and the line between those two marks runs roughly east to west. Every single time, no moss required. Failing that, read your water. Creeks and drainages run downhill toward bigger water, and bigger water tends toward people, toward roads, toward somebody who can help you. A ridgeline of wind-bent trees, all leaning the same stubborn direction, will tell you plenty too, if you know to look up instead of down at the bark. So here's your this week, and it costs you all of 10 minutes. Walk out your own back door and find north 3 separate ways without touching a phone. The shadow stick, the drainage running toward the low ground, whatever else your own land is willing to show you. Do it once, deliberately, and moss will never fool you again as long as you live. That's number 5. It gets you lost, and lost is bad enough on a cold night. But number 4 is worse, because it doesn't feel like trouble at all while it's happening. It feels like the one thing in camp that's actually working. Picture a flask going hand to hand around a fire, and a man tipping it back, and that flush of heat spreading warm through his chest a second later. Everybody around that fire nods along. You can see it working. You can feel it working, if it's you holding the flask. He passes it on and says the thing men have said to each other for 200 years on a cold night. That'll put some heat in you. Liquor warms a man in the cold. It's about as old and as trusted a belief as there is out here, and it's got a mascot to go with it. Somewhere in the back of most everybody's head is that old picture of the St. Bernard dog trudging through an alpine snowdrift with a little wooden cask of brandy strapped under its chin, coming to save some half-frozen traveler. It's been printed on postcards and calendars and cartoon strips for longer than any of us have been alive. Here's the part that ought to give you pause, neighbor. That image, the dog, the cask, the whole rescue scene, came from a painting done by an English artist named Landseer back around 1820. It was never a photograph of an actual rescue. It was never even based on one particular true story. A man who'd likely never pulled a soul out of an alpine snowbank in his life painted the single most famous picture of alcohol as salvation, and it got copied and printed and stitched into the culture until everybody just assumed it must be true. The pulp westerns and the tavern signs did the rest of the work after that, keeping the flask in every hero's coat pocket. Now here's what's actually happening in your body when that warmth spreads through your chest. That liquor is opening up the blood vessels near your skin, what the medical folks call vasodilation, and it sends warm blood rushing up close to the surface where you can feel it. That's the flush. That's the sensation fooling you. But every bit of that warm blood sitting close to your skin is warm blood bleeding its heat straight out into the cold air around you, faster than it would have otherwise. It doesn't warm you, neighbor. It makes you feel warm while it opens the door and lets the heat walk right out of the house. And it gets worse than that, because alcohol dulls two of the very things keeping you alive out there. It blunts your shivering, which is your body's own furnace trying to generate heat, and it dulls your judgment right along with it, so you're less likely to notice you're in real trouble until you're deep in it. The wilderness medicine folks will tell you plainly that alcohol is about the worst thing you can hand a cold man, right up there with taking his coat off for him. I'm not calling it a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a smoky room and voted to sell you that picture of the brave dog in the little cask. It just paid, for a long time, to keep that image sitting warm in your head, the same way it paid the tavern keeper every time a cold man believed it. What actually raises a man's core temperature is calories and warm, sweet liquid, not liquor. And there's a piece of this most folks never learn at all, which is that a cold camp loses most of its heat straight down into the ground, a man sitting or lying on. Get something between your body and that bare earth, boughs, a pack, dry bark, anything, and it does more for you than the fire ever will by itself. That's number 4. It robs you slow and quiet, and it feels like comfort the whole time it's doing it. Number 3 does you damage you can see with your own eyes, and this one was taught in classrooms, to children, in good faith, for generations. Notice what those last 2 have in common, neighbor. Neither one came off a ridge. One got printed in a scout book by a man who never lived by what he wrote. The other got painted on a canvas by an artist who likely never pulled a soul out of the snow in his life. And both of them got handed to us like they'd been sitting in the family for generations. That's the pattern I need you watching for now, because from here it stops being about getting lost or getting cold. From here it's about tissue and blood. Picture a pair of hands, white and waxy at the fingertips, hard to the touch like they belong to somebody else entirely. A well-meaning man kneels beside the fellow they belong to and starts packing them with snow, working it in, rubbing hard, because that's what you do. That's what everybody's grandfather always said to do. The man whose hands they are grits his teeth through it because it's supposed to hurt. Pain means it's working. That's the belief, plain as anything, and it got taught wide in this country. A whole generation had it sitting in their heads before they were even 12 years old, sitting right there next to their times tables. Trace it back far enough and you find it in old military field manuals, then in the early Red Cross printings, then straight into the scout handbooks that raised half the fathers and grandfathers in this country. Rub it with snow, bring it back slow, never warm it fast. Here's what's actually happening to those fingers while the rubbing goes on. Frozen tissue is packed through with ice crystals, sharp little things, and every bit of friction against that skin is tearing tissue apart mechanically, cell by cell. You are not restoring one drop of circulation. You're shredding flesh that's frozen too numb to feel it happening until later, when it does. Now here's the part of this one that separates a careless debunking from the honest truth, and I want you to hear it close, because Eben would have wanted you to hear it whole. The old rule about warming slow wasn't pure foolishness. There was a real danger buried underneath it. If you thaw frozen tissue out and then let it refreeze, that second freeze does worse damage than the first ever did. That's not old wives' talk. That's what the wilderness medicine people will tell you plainly. So if you cannot promise that tissue a warm, dry, protected rest of the journey, You do not thaw it out in the field at all. That's the honest nuance nobody tells you when they're just trying to sound smart, tearing down the old ways. What actually works, when you can keep it warm afterward, is a warm water bath, somewhere around 100 degrees, held there for near half an hour, gentle the whole time, never rubbed. And the frontier true version of that same idea, the one your own people would have known without a thermometer, is skin against skin. Tuck those cold fingers into a warm armpit against another man's belly and hold them there. If you were taught the old way, that's no failing on your part, neighbor. It was printed in a book with a badge on the cover and handed to children with the best of intentions behind it. That one was taught in classrooms, out in the open, in good faith. Number 2 was never taught in any classroom. It was sold in a tin on a hardware store shelf, and I'd bet money there's still one riding around in a glove box within 20 miles of where you're sitting tonight. Picture the strike, fast, low to the ground, gone before the eye can properly follow it, and then a man on his back with 2 puncture marks already welling up dark on his calf. Somebody's got a knife out before the fears even settled in his own chest. 2 crossed cuts, deep, right over the bite. Then a mouth pressed to the wound, sucking, spitting, sucking again. You've watched this scene in 100 different westerns. It's about as familiar an image as this whole country owns. Cut it, suck it, spit it out. Tie something tight above it so the poison can't travel. That's the belief, and it didn't come from nowhere. It came out of the same dime novels and frontier tales that gave us most everything else we're sorting through tonight. But this one had help nobody else on our list got. This one got manufactured. Sold under names like the Cutter Kit, little rubber suction cups and a small blade, packaged neat in a tin, sitting on drugstore and hardware store shelves in this country for decades. A man could walk in, hand over his money, and walk out with the myth in his pocket, official looking, trusted, ready. Nobody hid the truth from you on this one, neighbor. They stamped it right into the tin and put a price tag on it. Here's what that little ritual actually does to a man who's just been bitten. The cutting opens up more tissue than the fangs ever touched, and it hands infection a doorway it wouldn't have had otherwise. The suction, and the studies on this are about as settled as anything in wilderness medicine gets, pulls out a share of venom so small it barely counts. Nowhere near enough to matter. And the tourniquet doesn't stop the poison. It just traps it, concentrating the damage in one narrow stretch of limb instead of letting the body handle what it's built to handle. Every second spent on that whole performance is a second not spent moving toward the one thing that actually saves a man's life, which is real medical care, in a real building, as fast as you can get there. The wilderness medicine people are plain about what actually works. Stay calm, because a racing heart moves venom faster than a still one does. Keep the limb roughly level, not raised high, not hung low. Pull off rings and watches before the swelling makes that impossible. And here's the one worth remembering, the one that actually gives you something useful to do with your hands instead of a knife. Take a pen, mark the leading edge of the swelling right on the skin, write the time beside it, and start moving. That mark tells whoever treats him exactly how fast the poison's traveling, and it's worth more than any cut ever was. Every minute spent on that tin was a minute not spent going down the mountain. If there's a kit like that riding around in your truck or your pack right now, take it out this week. Put it in the trash where it belongs. That's your one thing. That's 4, neighbor. 4 things Eben sat me down and warned me about, one at a time, over the years I had him. Number 1, he never got to, and it's not because it's the deadliest of the 5. It's because number 1 doesn't look like bad advice at all. It looks like kindness. It looks like exactly what a good man does the moment he finds somebody in trouble. I did it, on a mountain, to somebody who mattered to me. Everything so far tonight you could have read in a book and come out the other side just fine. A tin, a scout manual, a painting on a wall, all of it sorted out from a comfortable distance, with nobody's blood on the ground while we talked about it. What comes next isn't like that. I can't hand you this one from a book. because I wasn't reading about it. I was standing in it. And the reason it's number one isn't that it's the deadliest thing on this list, though it might be. It's that it's the one you do because you were trying to help. We'd been up on the high ground 2 days when we found him. A hunting partner of mine, a man I'd known most of my life, gone down somewhere between the ridge and the truck, and by the time we got to him, he wasn't shivering anymore. I didn't know yet what that meant. I know now. His skin had gone the color of ash, and his words were coming out slow and wrong, like a man half asleep trying to talk his way through a dream. We did what you'd do, what I'd have told you to do an hour ago if you'd asked me. We got him to the fire fast. We stripped the wet clothes off him right there in the open. We rubbed his arms and his legs hard, trying to bring some color back into them, trying to make him look like himself again. Somebody had coffee going, and we got a little of it into him, warm and sweet, because that's what you do for a cold man. For a few minutes it looked like it was working. His color seemed to come up a shade. He said something that almost made sense, and then something in him just changed. I don't know a better way to say it than that. His breathing went somewhere I didn't like, shallow and uneven, and there was a stillness that settled over him that hadn't been there a minute before, a stillness that had no business being there at all. I remember looking at my own hands, still rubbing warmth into his arm like that was going to be the thing that saved him, and understanding, somewhere underneath the panic, that whatever was happening to him was happening because of what we were doing, not in spite of it. I think about that mountain the way you think about a name you can't stop turning over. The fire, the rubbing, the coffee going down. Every one of those hands on him moving fast, moving urgent, moving exactly the way kindness moves when it's scared. I didn't know yet what a man's heart does when you handle him wrong at the coldest edge of his life. I only knew that something in him had turned, right there under our hands, and that everything we'd done to save him so far had been the right thing, done to the wrong body, at exactly the wrong speed. Go back to that fire with me, neighbor, because now I understand what we were looking at. There's a thing that happens inside a body gone deep enough into the cold, something the wilderness medicine people call afterdrop, and it works like this. While a man's core is fighting to survive, his body pulls the warm blood inward, away from the arms and legs, protecting the heart and the organs that matter most, and it lets the blood sitting out in the limbs go cold and thick and acidic. That blood just sits there, waiting, doing no harm as long as it stays put. But the moment you start rubbing those arms and legs hard, or plunging a man into sudden heat, you send all that cold, acidic blood rushing back toward a heart that's already barely holding its rhythm together. For some men, that flood is enough to stop the heart outright, right there in front of the people trying to save him. The fire didn't kill him, the kindness did. Everything those hands did that night was the right thing, done to the wrong body, at exactly the wrong speed. Here's the piece that would have told us which body we were looking at if we'd known to ask it. A man who's still shivering hard, still able to talk sense, even slurred, is in trouble, but he's not past the edge yet. Warmth and calories will bring him back. But a man who's stopped shivering, who's gone clumsy and confused, stumbling over his own words, that's a different man entirely. That's severe, and severe means gentle is the only speed that keeps him alive. The real answer, the one Eben would have wanted me to know before I ever needed it, moves slow on purpose. You handle a man like that like he's made of glass. You get him out of wet clothes without wrenching his arms around. You get dry insulation under him and over him, and mind you get something between his body and the bare ground, same as I told you back with the flask, because that ground will pull the last of his heat straight down into it. You warm the core first, not the hands and feet. Heat packs or warm bottles wrapped and held against his chest, his armpits, the sides of his neck. If he's alert enough to swallow on his own, warm, sweet liquid, nothing more. And the oldest version of all of it, the one that needs no equipment at all, is another warm body pressed against his, both of you wrapped together, sharing heat slow and patient. The way two people would have done it on this ridge, 200 years before either of us were born. He lived because a man who actually knew better got to him before I finished helping him my own way. That's the whole distance between me and the man who doesn't get to walk away from that mountain. About 11 minutes, and a stranger's knowledge that I didn't have yet. So here is the whole of it now, neighbor. Let me hand you all 5 at once, the way Eben would have wanted them handed. Moss lies. Read the ground and the water instead. The flask opens the door and lets your heat walk out. Insulate yourself from the cold ground instead. Snow tears at frozen tissue that can't feel it happening. Skin and shelter and patience instead. The tin in the glove box cost you the only thing that matters, which is time. Stillness, a mark on the skin, and speed toward real help instead. And the last one, the one that cost me the most to learn. When you find a man gone deep into the cold, you go slow. You go gentle. You warm the core before you ever touch his hands or his feet. That's the 5. 4 of them came from Eben, sat down across from me one at a time over the years I had him. The 5th cost me 11 minutes I don't expect to stop thinking about, not for the rest of my life. Here's what I want you to carry out of here tonight, and it isn't the 5. It's the habit sitting underneath all 5 of them. Real skill came down through hands. Somebody knelt beside you and showed you until your body knew it better than your head did. The counterfeits came down through print. And for about 100 years, print was louder than hands ever were. So the next time somebody tells you a thing is the old way, ask them one plain question: who did it and where? If the answer is a magazine, or a matinee screen, or a badge on the cover of a book, it isn't old. It's just been repeated a long time, loud enough that it started to sound like inheritance. Being a person who can't be shut off doesn't only mean knowing things, neighbor. It means knowing which of the things you were given are true. One thing this week. Go find whatever's passing for a first aid kit in your truck or your closet. Open it up and look at what's sitting inside, and ask yourself where each piece of it actually came from. If there's a snakebite tin in there, that's your one thing. Take it out. Now tell me something down below. Which one of these 5 did you get taught, and who taught it to you? A book? A scoutmaster? Your own father, standing over you the way mine stood over me? A movie you watched 100 times before you were 10? I want to know how it traveled down to you, because the one that shows up the most in these comments is the one I go deep on next. Next time, why a freezing man takes his own coat off and lies down in the snow feeling warm as anything, and why rescuers found men like that for 100 years and couldn't explain what they were looking at. Keep the old ways, the real ones, and I'll see you in the next one, neighbor.